Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You are absolutely not going to believe the scene that unfolded at the Indian Wells Tennis Garden yesterday. Novak spotted Carlos from all the way across the practice courts, marched right up to him, and before the young phenom could even open his mouth, the legend stared right into his soul and dropped four chilling words that completely stunned every single bystander. That single sentence perfectly exposes everything you could possibly want to understand about the most fascinating dynamic in all of professional sports today. But if you truly want to grasp the gravity of this desert reunion, we have to rewind the tape back to Melbourne. I am not just talking about the final score, but the entire atmosphere. Novak entered the 2026 Australian Open, shouldering the immense burden of a champion, desperate to prove a point not to the fans, but to his own reflection. He had been locked out of a major championship final ever since the grass courts of Wimbledon back in 2024. Throughout the entire 2025 season, either Jannik Sinner or Carlos Alcaraz had ruthlessly sent him packing at every single major event. It was a brutal reality that he openly confessed to during this week's presser, showing zero hints of making excuses or throwing a pity party. He actually pulled the plug on his Adelaide tune-up before swinging at a single competitive ball, landing down under completely stripped of the confidence those early season matches usually build. The man was 38 years old. The very same critics who spent the last 12 months drafting his retirement eulogies were already gleefully typing up the next chapter of his downfall. Yet what unfolded instead was a breathtaking display of pure, unadulterated dominance, reminding the globe exactly what a dialed-in Novak looks like. He carved through his quarter of the bracket with a surgical ruthlessness that his 2025 slump had somehow brainwashed people into forgetting. Staring down the barrel of a two-set deficit against Lorenzo Musetti in the quarters, he flipped the script completely before the Italian eventually bowed out with an injury. It was a sudden burst of salvation that the veteran snatched up, acting completely unfazed, as if luck had absolutely nothing to do with it. Then came the semi-final showdown, where he pulled off a masterclass that left absolutely every single spectator completely speechless. He took down Jannik Sinner in a gripping 5-set war, slaying the back-to-back defending champ and reigning world number 1 right then and there. The legend fended off an astonishing 16 breakpoints during that marathon, ultimately delivering what he himself called an all-time career-defining performance. At 38 years of age, returning to a major semifinal after an 18-month drought, he utterly shattered the sport's top dog over 5 grueling hours, completely winning over a roaring stadium. The exact second that final rally concluded, he simply collapsed into his courtside seat, soaking in the silence before the press could swarm him. The glowing numbers above the court were already shouting his victory. He laid his head on the pillow that evening, holding the crown of the most senior Australian Open finalist in modern history, surpassing Andre Agassi back in 2005 and outdating Jimmy Connors from 1991. By sunrise, he was already up, locking in for an apocalyptic clash with Carlos Alcaraz. That championship Sunday served as an absolute masterclass, perfectly illustrating the terrifying monster this 2026 version of Carlos was morphing into. The Serbian Titan stole the opening set 6-2. For about 60 solid minutes, he looked like the exact same unstoppable force that had just dismantled Sinner in 5 frames. Blasting serves with absolute venom and gliding around the baseline with a spooky agility that left analysts utterly baffled. Everyone assumed the exhaustion of that brutal semifinal would haunt him, yet he shattered Carlos's serve twice in the first frame, deploying that signature surgical baseline strike. The electricity inside Rod Laver Arena skyrocketed as the massive crowd felt history starting to brew. But then the young Spaniard flipped a switch, no flashy heroics, no wild dramatic gestures. With cold, calculated precision, he started smothering the ball earlier on his backhand wing, suffocating the wicked angles Novak was relying on. He started throwing in nasty, biting slice backhands, totally disrupting the rhythm and bounce that had been feeding right into the veteran's wheelhouse. He completely abandoned the futile mission of trying to outmuscle an immovable object and shifted to orchestrating the battlefield from a place of pure, icy composure. The exact headspace he would later talk about in the California press tense. He relentlessly snatched the next 3 frames, 6-2, 6-3, 7-5. The final tally glowed 2-6, 6-2, 6-3, 7-5, clocking in at 3 hours and 2 minutes of warfare. Carlos had officially cemented his legacy as the youngest warrior ever to conquer the career Grand Slam. 7 majestic trophies at just 22 years old. The fraction of a second that final shot was called out, he collapsed flat onto the hardcourt in sheer disbelief. He had walked onto the court missing his usual fire, yet ended up engulfed by his corner in an eruption of joy that had been brewing for 6 intense months, ever since he touched down in Australia, confessing to the world that claiming this title was his sole obsession, ever since the grass of 2024. But what went down during that trophy presentation is absolutely critical to remember, because it is the bedrock of what made this recent Thursday reunion so intensely fascinating. Long before anybody grabbed a microphone to give a polished speech, well before the flashes of the cameras or the handing over of the shiny silver hardware, Novak stepped over the divide, sporting a massive grin, and made a beeline for Carlos. They locked into a genuine bear hug, not some icy, forced net shake you usually see after a brutal dogfight, but a deep, authentic embrace between two warriors who actually love being around each other. They completely ignored the brutal war that just concluded on the scoreboard, sharing a quiet, knowing exchange that the seasoned reporter standing right there described as the ultimate proof of the profound, elite-level mutual respect that binds these two titans together. Then, the legendary Serbian pulled a maneuver that left the entire arena completely stunned. Hoisting that runner-up silver platter high into the air, he radiated an undeniable, authentic pride. He confessed to the roaring audience that he honestly believed his days of standing on a major championship podium were ancient history. Over 2 straight decades of battling down under, he admitted he had never bathed in such an overwhelming wave of affection and backing from the Melbourne faithful. Meanwhile, with Rafael Nadal taking it all in, from his front-row vantage point, the sheer electricity of that stadium forged a memory those lucky spectators will be passionately recounting until their final days. 3 distinct epochs of tennis history colliding on a single piece of hardcourt under one magnificent twilight. We witnessed the titan who set the stage before the legendary trio took over, the ultimate survivor of that very trio penning his breathtaking final acts, and the young phenom currently carving out the sport's future. But let us rewind to that fateful Indian Wells reunion and what the veteran actually muttered to his conqueror. Just a handful of words, yet they unveiled an absolute masterclass in psychology. His exact greeting, "You are hiding. Is everything all right?" 4 short words and a knowing laugh. Instantly, all the burning speculation regarding their highly anticipated face-to-face collision simply evaporated into the balmy Thursday breeze at the desert sanctuary. Here lies the untold saga behind that exact, electrifying encounter. The hidden architecture of their dynamic, the profound gravity it holds, and exactly why the explosive bond connecting Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic stands as arguably the most captivating interpersonal drama in global athletics. Their battlefield tally currently rests at an absolute deadlock, 5 magnificent victories apiece. Throughout their 10 epic clashes waged exclusively deep in the trenches of the sport's most prestigious, high-stakes tournaments. The historical scales tip in fascinatingly contradictory ways, shifting radically based entirely on your chosen perspective. Statistically, the veteran rules the broader numbers, yet the Spanish prodigy entirely monopolizes their major championship showdowns. Wimbledon 2023, Roland Garros 2024, and the Australian Open 2026. Whenever the bright lights of a slam final flickered on and tennis immortality hung in the balance, the ultimate victor has remained stubbornly identical. Alcaraz, Alcaraz, and Alcaraz again. This relentless trend serves as the heaviest, most undeniable truth, anchoring their entire rivalry, and it flawlessly illuminates the precise tactical puzzle the Serbian maestro, touching down in California hungry for crown number 6, desperately needs to shatter before the final curtain drops. So, how exactly did the legend spend those 6 weeks bridging the gap between Australia and the desert? He relentlessly ground through practice sessions at the University of California, Los Angeles, rubbing shoulders with the collegiate gridiron stars and soaking up fiery motivation from the roaring locker room. He quietly sorted out a pesky little tooth problem. He held deep, tactical summits with his inner circle. He mentally digested the carnage, and somehow, navigating the profound psychological labyrinth that a gladiator possessing his legendary mental fortitude utilizes after a devastating defeat, he unearthed the inner tranquility necessary to deliver those witty, unforgettable words that golden Thursday afternoon. Take a moment to truly digest the monumental willpower it demands to strut right up to the very conqueror who just shattered your championship dreams and casually crack a smile. To completely bury the toxic cocktail of soul-crushing agony, bone-deep fatigue, and lingering rage that inevitably follows a grueling 4-set championship heartbreak, swapping it instantly for radiant charm, lighthearted banter, and the kind of authentic, relaxed brotherhood reserved exclusively for off-court confidants. You will find countless athletes who, after dropping a major final, can barely muscle out a frigid greeting and a polite nod before fleeing the scene like a house on fire. Such a frosty reaction is totally standard. It is fundamentally in our nature. Suppressing the turbulent agony of a high-stakes defeat while trapped under the public microscope demands a Herculean psychological toll that casual spectators blissfully ignore. But the veteran refused to offer that cold, obligatory grip. Instead, he boldly marched through the sun-drenched Californian compound, tracked down the young Spaniard, jokingly accused him of lurking in the shadows, and warmly checked in on his well-being. That right there perfectly encapsulates the maestro's defining role within this unique, captivating partnership. Forged in the blazing fires of a 4-year, epoch-defining war, their bond has miraculously evolved into something vastly deeper, more vulnerable, and infinitely more fascinating than a standard athletic feud. The young phenomenon explicitly laid out the dynamic during the 2024 United States Open, painting a crystal-clear, unmistakable portrait of their underlying brotherhood. He openly confessed that away from the flashing cameras, they share an incredibly tight, genuine camaraderie, always trading stories and laughing in the sanctuary of the locker rooms whenever their paths cross, and boldly labeling his connection with the legend as one of his absolute purest, most treasured friendships on the brutal professional circuit. Yet, he immediately followed it with the savage caveat that elevates this entire saga into cinematic territory. The second those sneakers hit the baseline, all affection drops dead. War is war. Peace is peace. The Spanish powerhouse possesses an innate, terrifyingly sharp grasp of this absolute boundary. Meanwhile, the iconic Serbian, who has expertly balanced warm off-court alliances with a bloodthirsty, predatory drive that secured him 24 major crowns, has weaponized this exact philosophy since his rookie days. This intoxicating blend of heartfelt off-court brotherhood colliding violently with sheer, unadulterated killer instinct between the lines is precisely what transforms the Djokovic-Alcaraz spectacle into pure, unmissable theater. There is absolutely no fake politeness happening here. Their bond is genuine, yet the second they step onto the court, that camaraderie vanishes completely, making way for pure, unadulterated athletic warfare. All that affection instantly morphs into a fierce intensity that has birthed 5 of the most unforgettable showdowns in modern tennis history. This sharp shift between casually hanging out during a Thursday practice session and the cutthroat battles they wage deep into the Indian Wells tournament, assuming the brackets align as predicted, is exactly what makes their epic rivalry so incredibly rich and fascinating. Novak recently got completely candid regarding how he connects with the fresh wave of talent on tour during a few media sit-downs, dropping a bombshell that his bond with Carlos and today's kids feels significantly tighter than anything he shared with Roger or Rafa throughout their 20-year reign. That legendary trio was locked in such a suffocatingly tight race, constantly hunting for the exact same historic milestones simultaneously, that there was simply zero breathing room left to cultivate a true off-court brotherhood. When it comes to the young Spaniard, however, their massive age gap completely rewires the whole atmosphere. It allows the Serbian legend to serve as the ultimate, terrifying final boss blocking the kid's path, while doubling as a wise elder statesman whose praise actually means the world. Novak openly sang the prodigy's praises long before Carlos ever managed to defeat him. Back at the 2022 US Open, he confidently declared tennis had a bright future when that 19-year-old kid from El Palmar claimed glory, uttering those words well before tasting the bitter pill of losing to him. He would eventually learn that agonizing feeling firsthand at Wimbledon in 2023, on the Parisian clay in 2024, and under the Australian sun in 2026. Yet, astonishingly, suffering those 3 monumental championship defeats hasn't shifted his admiration an inch from that bold statement he made in New York back in 2022. Now, landing in the California desert adds a thrilling sense of anticipation to their latest encounter. Novak has conquered this prestigious event 5 times, perfectly tying Roger's legendary haul. Absolutely no one has ever managed to hoist a 6th trophy here, though his last triumph dates back to 2016, which is also the exact time he last survived past the 4th round. Enduring a 10-year drought at a venue where you practically own the real estate is an agonizingly long dry spell. This massive gap naturally sparked serious doubts regarding whether the slow, gritty desert courts still harmonize with his 2026 playing style like you did a decade prior. However, the gladiator, who stepped up to the microphone in California this week, looked nothing like a veteran quietly accepting his sunset years. He painted his Australian campaign as a breathtaking launch to his season. Surging past Sinner in a grueling 5-set major semifinal at 38 years of age was an experience he called purely phenomenal. The fire in his belly and the bounce in his step heavily implied that the 6 weeks of rest following his Aussie run had completely recharged his batteries rather than draining them. Coming in as the 3rd seed, he awaits an opening clash against either Misrak or Paracard. Assuming the tournament unfolds by the book, a blockbuster semi-final collision course points straight toward the very same kid he was playfully teasing on Thursday. Meanwhile, Carlos struts in as the reigning back-to-back king of the desert, boasting an absolutely flawless, undefeated record throughout 2026. Touching down on Tuesday, reporters instantly grilled him about hunting down the Serbian's monstrous 41-match unbeaten run from 2011, to which he offered a beautifully raw, grounded response, confessing he never truly grasped the sheer insanity of that milestone until he hit 12 victories and desperately tried to map out the mountainous climb to 41. The Spaniard admitted he was simply thrilled to be striking the ball beautifully. He emphasized finding a deep inner peace right now. Then, stepping onto the sun-baked concrete of the California complex that Thursday, the very legend he had vanquished down under just 6 weeks prior cracked a joke that had him grinning before a single rally even started. That glowing moment of camaraderie isn't just a charming sideline distraction, it is the vital, beating heart framing their entire rivalry. These two titans, one rapidly ascending toward a limitless horizon and the other standing tall at the spectacular twilight of a legendary run, share a mystical bond stretching far beyond their 10 face-offs, their perfectly split 5 victories apiece, or those 3 monumental major finals. They are eternally tethered by that unforgettable 2022 sequence where the veteran gazed at the newcomer and loudly proclaimed tennis was completely secure, blissfully unaware of the havoc those very hands would soon unleash upon his own legacy, as well as that magical January evening in Melbourne where the exhausted youngster collapsed to the floor in triumph and the gracious elder sprinted across the divide with a beaming smile to offer a deeply authentic embrace that melted the entire stadium. Their Thursday run-in consisted of nothing more than 4 quick words and a shared chuckle. But the impending storm brewing for the latter stages of this sun-drenched tournament will deliver a spectacle infinitely louder than casual banter. We are looking at an explosive collision between 2 of the most phenomenally well-rounded athletes ever to pick up a racket, locking horns with a terrifying, primal ferocity fueled by an unyielding inner fire they simply cannot extinguish, all culminating in a blood-pumping blockbuster carrying the heavy, dramatic history they've written since their 2022 New York genesis. Friendships officially die the moment the umpire calls play, yet beyond the baselines, their mutual respect runs so deep that the Serbian spots his young rival across a crowded training facility and immediately shouts, "Are you hiding from me? Is everything okay?" And honestly, that beautifully sums up their entire dynamic. Drop your wildest tournament predictions down in the comments. So, who takes the crown when the Serbian legend collides with the Spanish prodigy deep in the Californian desert? I need your absolute final prediction and the hardcore logic backing it up. Trust me, I devour every single comment you drop. Beyond the strategic maps, there is a profound, almost mythological weight to this clash. A magnitude perfectly captured by that viral afternoon encounter, exposing truths no mere statistics could ever reveal. Tennis is certainly no stranger to epic, era-defining warfare. For 2 solid decades, the Swiss maestro and the Spanish bull totally consumed the game, pushing beyond a mere competitive feud to become the very heartbeat of the sport itself. The unholy trinity of Novak, Rafa, and Roger ruled the exact same brutal epoch, bleeding for identical trophies and forging an unearthly standard of greatness that shattered history books and will likely remain unmatched until the end of time. Yet, beneath that glittering surface, true brotherhood within that elite trio was virtually non-existent. The battlefield was entirely too suffocating, the glory too bitterly contested, leaving absolutely zero oxygen for genuine affection. Their public admiration was massive, yet strictly professional. However, the effortless banter and behind-the-scenes chatter we are witnessing now, in the profound bond the young Spaniard details regarding the veteran icon, operates on a completely alien wavelength, forged simply because the master is approaching his twilight while the apprentice is just igniting his dawn. This sheer generational imbalance cultivates a rich, authentic camaraderie that blood feuds between exact peers simply suffocate. The all-time great actually confessed this exact sentiment out loud when pressed about his dynamic with today's rising bloodline. He shockingly admitted to feeling a tighter, truer bond with Carlos and these fresh vanguards than he ever managed to forge with his ultimate rivals across 20 grueling years of summit-level warfare. Those three titans stood shoulder to shoulder in such agonizing gridlock, locked in such an eternal cutthroat race for identical hardware, that the sheer animosity of the chase devoured any chance of a personal connection. Now, standing across from the young prodigy, a remarkably peaceful duality breathes. Unfiltered mutual adoration dances perfectly in step with cold-blooded killer instinct, thriving side by side without ever neutralizing the other's fire. You felt that exact electric tension buzzing through that legendary forward exchange late last week. This was no polite public relations stunt. This is a brotherhood forged in the fires of 3 major championship clashes and 5 absolute bloodbaths, emerging from the crucible not just unbroken, but fiercely intensified by the carnage. His punchline hits flawlessly precisely because their foundation is rock solid enough to take the hit. The young phenom implicitly understands the heavy, unspoken respect wrapped within those syllables coming straight from the king. And the veteran, who has bled at the highest altitude of tennis for 20 years, suffering agonizing defeats at the hands of Roger, Rafa, Andy, and now Carlos, possesses absolute mastery over the psychological frequency he broadcasts on, opting to shatter the tension across a training court 6 weeks post-battle with a sly remark instead of a sterile, boring greeting. He went for the laugh. That single brilliant decision speaks volumes about the raw, undeniable reality of their current dynamic. Moreover, it paints a deeply ominous picture of the explosive atmosphere waiting for us deep in the tournament, assuming destiny forces them to collide once again. We also need to dissect the incredibly precise vocabulary deployed during that afternoon encounter. Accusing a rival of ducking him while cheekily checking on his well-being is the trademark taunt of an older brother, not a mortal enemy. Dropping the word hiding suggests the maestro was actively hunting his heir down across the complex, even though it honestly just boiled down to staggered arrival schedules and the sprawling geography of the desert facility. Yet, deliberately spinning it into a playful indictment demands an intimate read on the kid's comedic timing and supreme swagger that the barb will trigger a smile. The Serbian legend oozes that exact brand of swagger. He banks on countless private chats, intense stadium proximity, and the raw emotion of their Australian embrace to anchor his gamble. He has cracked the code to the Spaniard's personality, firing the shot with zero doubt. Naturally, the younger star who openly cherishes this bond as a rare tour treasure cracked up instantly. There was no other possible reaction, any alternative, like a robotic grip or overly rehearsed media nonsense, would have felt utterly counterfeit, a toxic lie masquerading as sportsmanship, forcing an icy protocol onto a brotherhood that has thrived on pure, unadulterated fire. That fleeting tease and the resulting chuckle delivered more cinematic truth than an eternity of heavily scrubbed media day interviews ever could. When you exist in a ruthless arena where every single syllable is policed, sanitized, and sterilized by agents, stumbling upon such a pure, off-the-cuff spark of humanity demands our absolute undivided attention. The main battlefield officially opens its gates this Friday, with a blockbuster showdown lurking somewhere deep within the back half of the schedule. A scorching gladiator boasting a 12-0 streak while hunting his 41st victory anchors one bracket, staring down a 5-time desert king who has been starving for this specific crown for 10 grueling years. Until destiny finally forces these two titans to cross rackets, we must wade through the relentless grind of training sessions, mundane media circuits, and the exhausting gears of a professional 14-day marathon at a Masters 1000 event. Yet, the true epic of this desert war was irrevocably sparked late last week, the precise second the Grandmaster locked eyes on his heir apparent from afar. He stared across the training courts, a mere month and a half after suffering that devastating championship defeat, figuring a clever punchline was the ultimate opening gambit. Friendships completely vanish the second you step inside those lines, but the actual war holds off until Friday. Truly appreciate you tuning into this journey, and catch you in the upcoming chapter.